Hi, I'm Eddie Burke. I've been the bartender at the Hollywood Improv for 40 years, and this is my podcast, Eddie's Bar at the Improv. Hey guys, this is Eddie Burke. Welcome to Eddie's Bar at the Improv podcast. We're in a little bit of a different location today. We're actually in front of the brick wall at the Improv. We've been kicked out of the bar for the moment, but I have my special guest, Steve Byrne, here today, and that's going to make up for that. Mr. Byrne, thank you, sir,
Pleasure.
for being here.
It makes sense to be kicked out of the bar when Bert Kreischer's in the bar. So
right.
Anybody else would be like, well, maybe not, but
yeah,
it makes a lot of sense.
As long as he keeps his shirt on.
Well, good luck with that.
Yeah. So let's kind of start at the beginning here with you. How'd you get started in comedy?
Well, I got started, I finished school in Ohio. My father, who's originally from New York City, got transferred back to New York when I was in school, and I said, can I crash on your couch and experience New York City for a few months before I moved to California and hit it big, right? So he said, of course. So I crashed on my mom and dad's couch. I show up the first day I'm there. I say, I'm not coming home till I get a job. I started on 86th and Broadway, worked my way down to 50th and Broadway. Every restaurant I could hand my resume into, and the last place I walked into was Caroline's Comedy Club. Never been to a stand-up show, never intended to be a comedian, but just applied like any other job. The manager happened to be there. His name was Brian. He said, what do you want to do? I said, I will do anything. He said, fill this out, come back tomorrow. And the next day I was working. I was hosting, sweeping the floors, answering phones, taking reservations, all of it. And I was enamored. I saw all these comics on stage. I saw Chappelle before he was Chappelle, Jon Stewart, Jimmy Fallon, Margaret Cho before they were, I mean, Margaret was probably established by then. But yeah, so I saw all these great comics, and I saw a bunch of young comics my age that were doing it, and I was like, that looks like fun. They'd have this new talent showcase they would do all the time, and I said, I think I could do that. So I built up enough confidence. After 4 months, I went September 30th, 1997 to Stand Up New York on the Upper West Side. Did 5 minutes. My parents were my two paying customers for the Bringer show, and it went off like a rocket. I always say the first time I did stand-up was like the first time I had sex. It was quick. I cried immediately afterwards. I couldn't wait to do it again. So that was pretty much it. I was just locked in after that.
Okay. How was the second time? Was it as
the second time was even better.
Oh.
So the second time I was there, a booker named Roger Paul, and he was managing comics at the time, was in the audience and saw me, and he gave me his card. He said, you got to call me. You got to call me. So I called him the next day. He said, how long you been doing this? I said,
10 minutes.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I said, not too long. He said, all right, well, I'm going to manage you. I said, okay. And then he said, honestly, how long you been doing stand-up? I was like, twice. He's like, twice? And I started working right away. I was on the road emceeing in the tri-state area for like $50 a show.
Wow.
And kind of getting going that way. So after 2 times, I was kind of thrown in the deep end.
That is unusual because usually, well, you know better than I, it takes forever.
Oh, yeah. Well, I bombed after the second time a lot.
So it was the third time.
Yeah, it was the third time, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, until maybe like the 20th. I used to have a journal. I would write down after every set I had, up until like, I think it was like 900 sets. I stopped writing in this journal. I have all the journals at home still, but it's pretty wild to see those things.
I'll bet. You are an actor, a writer, a producer, and this is, I found very interesting, a singer. Were you the front man for a band called Sausage something or other?
Sausage Party. Well, Sausage Party is my closer on the road. So I worked with Vince Vaughn on this Wild West comedy show. And that's how I initially met him. And at the end of the show, he brought me, Sebastian Maniscalco, Brett Ernst, Ahmed out at the end. And we would do this interpretive dance to The Lion King in Las Vegas. And I thought, just the response from the audience, it felt like you were in a wind tunnel. Like the crowd was going fucking bananas. And I was like, I got to do something like that at the end of my show. So I was like, I'll create a boy band. And I basically create a boy band. I pick 5 guys from the audience. They come up. And then I say, I give them all handle names like Prison Fuck Toy, Sexecutioner, Chef Boyardee, whatever. It goes on and on and on. Black guy's Romeo Horsecock. You always got to have your black guy who's going to be your tent pole at the end. And then you bring a girl up, and I walk them through these dance routines, and then at the end, each guy has to dance for the girl by himself. And I've been doing it for a few years, and I stopped doing it because I was just tired of doing it. It's 15 minutes of my act. And Colin Jost, who's on Weekend Update on SNL, he used to open for me. And he came out and saw me. He's like, "Are you done doing Sausage Party?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Dude, you got to do it. It's so fun." And it is one of those bits where every time I do it, the staff lines along the wall, they watch it, and you just never know what's going to happen.
You ever think of doing that, almost as a separate act altogether, or because I'm thinking back to Andy Kaufman and Tony Clifton,
Oh yeah,
stuff like that. I mean,
I did it a handful of times here, but what sucks is that if you're in the middle of the lineup, you're burying anybody that's following you. It's like, I got to follow that? Fuck. So I just don't do it unless you're closing the show. I don't want to be disrespectful,
You can do that. You can close the shows. I think you've earned that.
Yeah, I'll do it before Orny. He'd love it.
Oh, God. I can see the shit hitting the fan now. And you've done a lot of directing. Documentaries or what have you, and all. Is that a passion that you have that you want to direct?
Much like stand-up itself, I never knew I wanted to do it until I was doing it. And, the Amazing Jonathan doc that I did, it's called Always Amazing. It's on YouTube. It's absolutely for free. When Jonathan was diagnosed, obviously my heart went out to him when he said he's making Return to the Stage and that Joel Osborne was opening for him. It all kind of laid out for me narratively, because at the time I was writing the script, the opening act that I just completed. So I knew the story beats, and I was sitting there daydreaming about Jonathan's story beats, and I called him up within an hour. I said, "I can make a documentary about you. Can I make a doc?" He said, "Yeah, of course, follow me." So I went out and did it, and once I did it and put together the story, you don't know how it's going to be received, right? Mm-hmm. So you just put it out there, and on YouTube, it's got 19,000, 20,000 likes and 200 dislikes.
Wow.
And YouTube's a cesspool, the comment section. So I saw that. I was like, all right, this is kind of cool. And then when I was given the opportunity to direct the opening act, I said, sure. I read every book. I took master classes online, Ron Howard's, Werner Herzog, Scorsese's, and none of it would prepare me for
for the actual work.
These 16, 17-hour days. And
I can imagine.
It was crazy.
Well, since you brought up the opening act, that is something that you just completed.
Yes.
Right? And tell my 3 listeners what it's all about.
Well, I think you might appreciate this more than most because it does take place at an improv. And the improv comedy club, to me, was always kind of like, to any young comic, I think it's Yankee Stadium. You start off in the minor leagues and you work your way up. And this ultimately is the gig for me. I really think that. I think, there's comics that ascend to stadiums. There's comics that ascend to theaters. But the tough thing is you gotta stay relevant and you gotta keep a draw. And so few do that. And so the clubs, I think, whether you're going up, whether you're going down, the clubs will always be there for you as long as you're good to the clubs. So I wanted to make a great film about stand-up comedy because so many films, the stand-up is secondary, like The Big Sick. He's a stand-up, but it's not about stand-up. And Sleepwalker with me is about stand-up, but it's about his condition and his relationship. And this one I just said, I want to make a straight-up stand-up film. And so it's an MC's very first time ever on the road. So the whole film takes place over 4 days. And the first half of the film is all the romanticism, optimism, and partying of hanging out with the feature act. And the back half of the film is all the isolation, sobriety, and reality of finally warming up to this road-weary veteran that's played by Cedric the Entertainer. And Jesus Christ.
Oh, my God. It's Bert Kreischer in drag. In nothing, actually. Oh, God.
That's the most I've seen her dressed in the morning, actually, by the way.
Yeah, right. Well, you guys need to stop.
Yeah.
Since you brought it up, the actually... God, he made me lose my whole thought here.
Yeah, that's gonna... no coffee needed now. I'm wide awake.
The directing that you've done... Do you want to direct movies and so on? I gather my thoughts here. He just threw my whole...
Explain what just happened.
Okay, so Bert Kreischer just walked in. His daughters are... he does these viral videos, or he does these videos to promote upcoming tour dates, and he'll be in a bar, take his shirt off, buy everybody a shot. He'll do something outlandish. He'll be in a bikini and, whatever. And his daughters are river dancing, basically, in the improv. And Bert just walked in leather boy shorts, white tube socks, black tap shoes, a wide-brimmed fedora, and he just started tap dancing for us in all of his glory.
I lost my trend. But
so just picture a scallop tap dancing, and that's what we saw.
Oh boy!
Yeah,
that's Bert Kreischer. I can't get him on the podcast, but he'll walk.
Well,
in
he
here.
just did it.
He just that's right. that was his appearance.
Unofficially did it. But in terms of directing, would it something I'd want to do again? Yeah, I think that when Vince Vaughn, who produced the opening act, said, "What do you want to do? Do you want to be in it?" And I thought, geez, well, I'm too old to be the MC and feature, and I'm too young to be the headliner. Because visually, you want somebody who looks established,
Did you have somebody in mind when you as far as the headliner went?
Yeah, when I was writing it, the character's name's Billy G, and I named it after Billy Gardell because there were so many headliners that along the way gave me tokens of advice that I implemented in the script. So for me, it was Gardell.
Who was also from Pittsburgh, right?
Who's also from Pittsburgh, yeah, Pittsburgh guy. And the film takes place at the Pennsylvania Improv, but it's really the Brea Improv. But I told Vince, I go, I think I'm too young, I'm too old, and I don't want to be one of these secondary characters, so I'm just glad it's being made, to be honest with you. He said, well, why don't you direct it? It's your story. I said, okay. And I thought once you're given the burden of responsibility of being the conduit of the story and facilitating the story and the responsibility of it all, I thought that's something I like doing. So yeah, I certainly enjoy doing it, and I'm creating a TV thing and creating another film thing. And I would, instead of being in front of the camera, I'd like to be behind the camera to again just to pull the strings on the story.
Well, speaking of TV things, you created, wrote, produced Sullivan Son, which was a pretty successful show on, was it TBS?
TBS, yeah.
Yeah.
3 seasons, yeah.
3 seasons. I watched it. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
It was a lot of fun, especially...
A show about a bar you related to?
A little bit. It was a little difficult. I'm trying to picture myself there, but it just...
Yeah.
But you had all. You had Ahmed, you had Owen, God, I don't know who else.
Roy Wood Jr.
Yeah.
And then so many comics would come in and do guest sets, but it was an amazing experience, and we would still be on the air because we were the highest rated original program that TBS had at the time. And Kevin Riley, a new president, came in and basically, butchered everything as all presidents do once they come into a network. What you learn basically is that it's a business decision. They don't get a kickback from anything that's still on the air prior to their regime. So look, 3 seasons, we had 2 million viewers an episode. We were really doing well. We were having a blast. And it's the reason why you move here, right? I mean, you move here with your suitcase full of aspirations, looking at the sound stages, thinking, man, one day, it'd be great just to be on that sound stage. And I always remembered Noah Wiley. At the time we were doing it, there was a book called Top of the Rock. And there were excerpts and anecdotes from all those, all the actors, producers, showrunners of Must See TV Thursday nights on NBC. It was Warren Littlefield put it together. And I remember Noah Wiley had said that he had done ER for so many years that he showed up at Warner Brothers soundstage just for a meeting, and the security guard was like, "We know who you are, but you got to still go through the security regiment." So he's given his ID, and they got to go through the whole thing. And then finally he goes to his meeting, and he's like, on the way back, I'm just going to stop by the ER stage. So he walks in. At the time, there's nothing being filmed in there. It's a vacant soundstage, and he walked in, and he said, it's as though it never happened.
Wow.
And I always remember that, and I always just thought to myself, every day I showed up on that soundstage, I was like, appreciate this. This is why you moved here. So every day we had a fucking blast. The bar would turn into a bar after every taping.
Really?
Every taping, we would pump in the kegs, we'd get out the whiskey. It's so funny, the first season we would do the shots and stuff from the bar, from the shot glasses on the bar, and then put them in the sink and realize, oh yeah, the sink doesn't work. And so
Steve Byrne, the partier, I didn't know about this.
We would drink so much. We'd get constant notices from security saying you can't drink, you can't smoke, you can't party, you can't do this, you can't run the golf carts. We would race golf carts on the back of the soundstage. I mean, we were tipping golf carts. It was so fun. It was an Animal House for 3 seasons. It was great.
Is this kind of similar to that New Year's Eve in Ontario years ago when it was late and you were there, your brother was there, a bunch of people were there. You guys were a little out of hand?
Yeah. I take pride when I walk out and I'm the last one at the bar. Yeah. It's always a badge of honor. I just did it at the Comedy Store this past weekend. I walked out and everybody was gone. I did it at the Irvine Improv. I was there for New Year's. And we realized because it was on a Tuesday that all the bars were closed in Brea. All the bars were closed in that shopping area or whatever. So I thought, all right, well, let's just grab these bottles of champagne nobody drank and let's bring them in the green room and let's drink. And we drank until I think 3 a.m. and we walked out and everybody was gone. The staff was gone. The lights were out. And I was like, hey, we really did it, guys. That was fucking great.
Yeah, you're more of a partier than I even knew.
I try to keep it in
low down,
in line, yeah. Especially
yeah.
when I'm like working and I got to drive. But on the road, I let loose a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, good for you. Here's a new Steve Byrne that I've learned about.
Yeah.
In earlier, like when you were in New York, when you lived in New York or whatever, you did something that was kind of crazy and outrageous and great, which was play every comedy club in one night.
Yep.
And you filmed that. What was that like?
Well, every comic at the time was doing an audio CD. This is 2003, or doing something like filming something on their own. And I thought, okay, well, I'm gonna do that, but I'm gonna do something different. I want to break the record for most sets in one night because I was doing 7 or 8 sets a night on a Monday. So I thought Dave Attell has the record at 12. I'll just aim for 13 sets in one night. We'll start at 6. We'll end at 2. I won't make it because a cab will fuck up. I'll get out late, a show run late, a show run early. The timing won't work out. And it was the one night in all my years that I was a stand-up comic in New York that everything worked out. I would walk out of the club and a cab would pull right up. I was like, this never fucking happens. And it worked out, and we did it. We had the record for a long time, and Aaron Berg recently broke the record.
Who is this?
He did a documentary, a great New York comic called Aaron Berg, and named Aaron Berg, and he did 25 sets in one night, and I don't know how the fuck you do that. I saw it, and I still like, how did he do that?
He had to start at 3 p.m.
He started early, and he went really late, and I just
You taped yours, did you not?
Yeah. So that's on YouTube, and it's completely for free again too. It's 13 or bust. And the great thing is that we would film, and in between the sets, we'd have interstitials with Robert Kelly, Dov Davidoff, and Bill Burr, and myself. We would just talk and pontificate about our goals and aspirations in stand-up. And it was funny to look back at that and see Bobby Kelly's very skinny. Dov looks the same. I think I look the same, and Bill Burr has full-blown ginger hair. Yeah. So it's funny to see that little time capsule of all of us at the time.
You've accomplished a lot, and I'm sure you have a lot more to accomplish, and I'm sure you will accomplish a lot more. I looked at I'll tell you what blew me away the most was the number of documentaries that you've done, which is I don't know how many, but a good few, and that you were so into directing. It's like, I know you as a comic, and I know that you're an actor and all that, but the directing I wasn't that aware of, other than I knew you were directing this movie. But did you ever get to direct any of the Sullivan shows?
No, it was never something I ever thought of doing, to be honest with you. And when when I was on Sullivan Son too, I was... I had so much to do because I was constantly facilitating storylines, my character. So even if I wasn't a part of it, I was there to set it all up. I was definitely more of a Dean Martin, and I always told the writers, and I was in the writers' room, I'd always be like, give that line to Owen, give it to Christine, give it to Brian. Why do you keep giving these lines away? I'm like, I'm Carson, I'm behind the desk. I'll always be visually in the show. So, that seems like a Christine line to me. And she would... that woman would just knock it out of the fucking park. We'd be at a table read, and she'd kind of phone it in. And The minute those lights went on, I'm telling you she just
The
decimated.
actress showed up. Mhm.
Oh my God, Brian Doyle Murray, Dan Lauria, Jody Long, the veterans on our show were just true pros. They were really, really great to work with. Learned so much from them.
I thought all of those guys, because we've all watched all those guys, and I think, what was it, the Wonder Years that Dan Lauria was in?
Yeah.
I mean, you watch these guys over the years, and they're just so good, they're so professional, they just don't seem to skip a beat in terms of whatever they do.
And Dan was doing Lombardi on Broadway at the time, and Vince and his wife happened to see it, and he said, I know a great guy to play your father. And I said, okay, great. So we got an Italian to play my Irish father and a Chinese-Japanese woman to play my Korean mother. So we kind of went 0 for 2 on that, but they did great jobs on it. But in terms of directing it, like especially sitcoms, it's kind of like you're more of a traffic cop. I mean, you have some input in the storylines and facilitating story. You could bring up issues with story, but you're really there to kind of get coverage and create the symphony of cameras. You know, we had 9 regular cast members, so you only got 4 cameras. So you've got to get your wide, so 1 camera's gone, and then it's like, who are we focusing on here? So you could do a handful of takes to make sure you get the coverage of everybody, but you also want to get who are you singularly honing in on, because the first take is usually the best because the audience is hearing the joke for the first time. So I really enjoyed working on a sitcom, and it's funny when you do a sitcom as opposed to these single camera shows, which everybody loves now because The Office and Parks and Rec, is that I think a multicam doesn't have the prestige of a single cam, because a single cam, it's like, oh my God, you know, Tina Fey did this, or, you know, this is very kind of like out there kind of esoteric humor. And then multicam is associated with flyover states and Midwest and Bible Belt and easy laughs. But after working on both, I'll tell you, a multicam is much more difficult because you have a live studio audience there, and you've got to get the joke. If you don't get the joke, you huddle with the writers and you talk until you get a joke. When you do a single cam, you film it, there's no audience there, and you just go, okay, I think we got it. I hope. But that's the big difference between the two.
Through.
Yeah.
All right. Irish, Korean. Changing the subject just a little bit. What are your favorite foods? Korean and Irish.
Korean barbecue, galbi. I love potatoes. That's the thing. People think Korea and South Korea and Ireland are so different, but they're both very similar. Like Koreans are known as the Irish of Asia because they're the most outgoing. They love to party. They love whiskey. They love potato. They love cabbage. They love singing, and they hate the sun.
Yeah, right.
And between the Irish and the Koreans, I mean, the old joke is you don't want either of them driving you home from the bar. So I love both, because both the Irish and both South Korea. See, South Korea, there's a thing, Koreans have this thing called Han. And I don't know that it's necessarily spiritual, but it's almost like having a perpetual chip on your shoulder. And I think that's the same thing with Ireland, because these are two kind of territories that have been fought over so many centuries, and split as well. There's a Northern Ireland, there's a Northern Korea. So I think because of that, there is definitely a chip on your shoulder, being the little guy on the totem pole.
Right.
So I definitely have that.
So your mother's Korean and your father's Irish?
Yeah, Army.
And did your mother cook for you? I know I'm a cooking show all of a sudden, but
oh, my mom loves cooking, and she's a great Korean cook. But when you're growing up, you don't appreciate the things that make you different. So I was always like, you know, cook me spaghetti and I want a burger and stuff. And so she was able to cook all that stuff. And as you get older, you come back to what,
Sure. And have you gone to Ireland?
Been to Ireland. I've been to China, Japan, Korea, Philippines, Guam, all over the Middle East. I've been everything from my background for sure, but a lot more other places
from where your parents live? Have you been to their hometowns, or I don't know, was your father born here?
Well, it's funny. My father's family stems from Wicklow, which is where the Byrne clan basically spread out from in Ireland, and then my mother is from Seoul, but Seoul is so much different than when she grew up, it was a third world country. So I actually got to perform on a USO show on the base that they met at. So
wow,
that was kind of cool. A lot of the things that the mess hall and all that stuff, it's all gone, and
Times change.
Times change, yeah. They're much better facilities now, but it was wild to get to be there.
You're married.
Yeah, married.
You have 2 kids.
2 kids, daughter, son. So the crazy days are less crazier.
How old are they?
Daughter's 7, son is 4.
Oh, boy.
Olivia and Kent, and they're actually in the opening act, so they think that they're going to be famous.
Yeah.
That was pretty wild.
How do you deal with that, going on the road and then coming back? How do they deal with it?
Well, they're pretty good with it. They understand this is the job. My wife just knew from the jump, this is the
Right.
gig, So if you don't like it, I don't know what to tell you. So she's definitely on board. The kids are great. The good thing is Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I'm gone. So 3 days, 4 days, I'm home. And every one of those 4 days, as much time as I can spend with them, I spend with them. So we got those Disney passes. At least once a month we'll go up to Disney and spend the whole day there. And
Yeah, then we're going with Dad to Disneyland, so it doesn't matter if he's gone Thursday, Friday, and Saturday or whatever it is.
Yeah.
He's taking
But the
us.
7-year-old's over it now. It's like, I'll pick her up early from school. She's like, oh, Disney again? It's like, you little spoiled bitch. Do you know what the fuck?
Oh,
I went twice in my
Jesus.
life, went from the time I was born to 18. You watch your goddamn mouth. My kids don't like pizza or McDonald's either, which is like, I remember last time I was like,
Did you ever think about giving them back?
I think so, yeah. I tried to stuff them back in my way. I'm like, get in there. But I told my kids, I'm like, yeah, let's get a pizza. And they both go, oh, we don't like pizza. I was like, go to your room until you learn from this
Yeah.
experience. You love pizza. Whose kids are you? It's
God,
crazy.
pizza and McDonald's, that's the American way.
Fuck yeah.
When your first time on the improv stage
Oh, yeah.
here, what was that like?
Well, coming from New York,
Notice how I jump from one thing. It's
no,
there's
sure,
no
yeah.
continuity.
But it's iconic. It is, and I'm somebody who loves going down the rabbit hole of like learning about the history of it all. And I remember watching, Evening at the Improv with Bud Friedman and seeing Bud come out. And even back then, like, he's good, but he's not funny, right? But, what a nice guy. And to know that eventually at some point I would become friendly with the guy, to me, it's kind of mind-blowing, but you go back and I'd see all that archival footage of Andy Kaufman on the stage, and you see the greatest hits of all the people that were on the improv stage and how historic it is. And I remember the first time I was here because I'd come from New York City, and Barry Katz, who was managing me at the time, set up some kind of showcase, and Matt Coleman was managing at the time, and I was so nervous. And I had done every club in New York City. I was the Comedy Cellar I thought was the toughest room at the time. And then you come in here, and in 2000, maybe 2003, the Improv was the fucking spot. It was
Right.
packed every night. It was jamming. That bar outside was great. And I was very intimidated. And
By the bartender was the
by the bartender, for sure. Yeah, broad shoulders, square jaw, a give no fuck attitude, constantly getting numbers from girls, turning them down.
There we go. That's it. Boy, you know me well. Like my jaw, my whatever. All right.
You completely forget about the astigmatism.
You definitely.
So I just remember hitting the stage, and the first 30 seconds you're a little wonky, and then all of a sudden you're back on the bicycle and you're riding, and it was great. It was one of those kind of fun sets. Yeah, it was, and I don't, I think I'd posted something about a year ago of like, every time I come here, I don't take it for granted. It's one of those historic venues that, through the years, it's changed a bit. It looks so much cool. Like, that's super cool. I love seeing that neon Evening at the Improv sign, the classic logo,
Yeah.
but there's nothing better than these bricks.
Right. That's the signature sign or whatever is in front of the brick wall. They call it behind. I say we're in front of the brick wall with that improv sign.
Yeah.
It's I think it's kind of legendary in terms of when a comic can get his picture or actually step foot on this stage.
Sure.
Do you ever lose I would assume that every time you go up anywhere, that excitement is still there, the energy,
Well, I think of it this way. There's comics that like you and I know that do the same shit for 30 years. And I think those are the people that work at an assembly plant doing this every day, putting a rivet in, and then they're suicidal, they're angry, they're fucking pissy, they're not fun to be around.
I know them all.
You know them all, and we know them, right? And then there's other comics that are like, all right, I at least got to do this today. I at least got to try this joke out today. And I think if you give yourself the opportunity to go back to those early years and experiment and always do new material, I think the job will never be boring. But I will say the suitcase gets a little heavier each year, especially with children.
Yeah.
And this last year or two, it was definitely grinding on me, the constant travel. It's 45 weeks a year of just getting on a plane and missing the kids. And as they get older, it gets tougher, you know?
That's the unfortunate part of, I guess, a comedian's job is taking off on the road, whether you're married or not. It's
Sure.
like at some point you kind of go like, I love this job, but this part is like, this is really wearing.
Yeah, it's, the hour on stage is great. The 23 hours getting there, all the other bullshit, sitting away, being from your family, that's the tough part. But I was in Dallas, Texas recently, and there was this kid in the front row with his mom. He must have been 19. I was shitting on this kid so fucking hard. It's Friday, you're out with your fucking mommy. I was dumping on this kid. And they were being such great sports. He was a great sport. And afterwards, across the hallway from the Addison Improv is a dueling piano bar. And I went over there to get a drink, and he and his mom were there. And I got talking to the mom, and she said, my son Tanner has had 7 open heart surgeries since he was,
Oh, wow.
a little kid. And then Tanner comes over to me. He's like, oh, my God, I had so much fun. I'm like, you were such a great sport. He's like, I needed tonight so bad. I just wanted to laugh. And it made sense once his mom told me about everything. And that's, I think, another example of like, don't take this for granted. You're privileged with an incredible opportunity to do something very special. Very few people get to do this job, and very few people get to headline, and very few people are anointed by the Improv, and very few people travel the country 45 weeks a year to make people laugh. And every show now, ever since Tanner said that to me, and it's something you kind of think about, but I hadn't really taken it to heart, is that somebody in this room tonight is suffering. Somebody in this room really fucking needs tonight. So I think that's kind of like recalibrated how I view my shows, not in terms of how I write or whatever, but in terms of always, and I don't think I've ever phoned it in, but really, really going the distance before those shows.
Well, that's interesting because, I mean, you make me think of the fact that, you're a comedian, you're kind of like a healer in a way for certain people, or you kind of give them a chance to forget,
Sure.
whatever their issues are. And
But you know that a lot of comics are probably doing this for self-medication as
oh,
well.
God,
So,
yeah. I mean, that part I understand too.
Yeah.
It's
I mean, you're dealing with a lot of self-medication out there.
Yes, I also work with a handicap, but it's it's kind of a tough thing. I was talking with someone, and it just, the whole thing about being a comedian and entertainer is that you're giving people an opportunity, be it for a 7-minute set, an hour, whatever, to escape reality.
Yeah.
And that's so important to all of us.
Sure.
And you and all the rest of the comedians and everybody else that entertains, period, are so important to people's lives in that way. And a lot of people don't realize, or a lot of entertainers don't realize that.
Yeah.
It's kind of you have, I don't want to say it's a responsibility, but it's something that as a performer, comes along with the package, even though you may not be aware of it until you run into someone like Tanner. But enough of this seriousness.
But you're right about that, and I think there's a lot of like what you were conveying, especially to in terms of the lines that the headliner discerns to our young MC in the opening act. So I think like, not to make it about the opening, but there's a lot of like knowledge that I've gained over the years, especially as a headliner, into my headlining years, that I discern to younger folks and to, maybe even comics, to think, hey, don't take this for granted,
Yeah, I think this generation of comics, from what I've seen, because when I started bartending or working here, there were like, I've said this before, maybe 200, 250 comics. Now there's 250,000.
Sure.
And I don't think as much as there's plenty of talent, I'm not talking about talent, there is not the respect for the craft in the sense of the history. I'll ask certain comics if you've heard of so-and-so, and they'll tell me no, and I go like, well, how do you get ahead? You know, you kind of like have to know the history of whatever you do.
Yeah.
I know the name of the first bartender that ever worked. I'm lying, but you know, it's because it just hit me. I don't know anything about bartending, but it's just an important thing.
Well, it's interesting. This, you know, now that the film's done, I've been gearing up to finish this new hour. And once I do this new hour, it's going to be different than any other stand-up special I've ever seen. Even aesthetics, but I'm doing a talk show, but I'm the only one on the talk show. So I come out, and the soundstage will look like a talk show, right? So I'll come out behind the rainbow classic curtain that Carson had, and I do 20 minutes of monologue, 20 minutes of panel, and 20 minutes of stand-up. I'll have a band there and everything. And because I thought aesthetically you got to do something to make the special special, and it's 3 different styles of writing. It's quick one-liners, monologue, storytelling, and pure stand-up, whatever stand-up is for you, right? So I thought this could be really interesting. So I went down a rabbit hole, and I bought the Carson box set, and I bought the Dean Martin variety show. I got like all 30 volumes of Dean Martin's show.
One of my favorites, Dean Martin.
The greatest. That's why in the film, the opening act, Jimmy O. Yang's character comes from Steubenville.
Where he comes from.
Where he was born. And Jen Kelly is named after Gene Kelly because he's from Pittsburgh. So I just had like these little nods to the old school. But I went down this Dean Martin rabbit hole, this Carson rabbit hole, and then that took me down a Bob Hope rabbit hole and a Dangerfield rabbit hole. Just in terms of learning the cadence of delivering monologue jokes. And what I love about Dean Martin is that he's a nightclub entertainer. And so back in the day, this would have been a great venue for Dean Martin or Sinatra. Now, maybe you would double the size of this, but they were still eating dinner. You'd hear plates clinking in the background of these bootleg audio recordings of it all. But, I mean, Dean Martin, probably half of any of the recordings I've listened to his at the Sands or, you know, at the Supper Club in Kansas City that I listen to all the time, half of it's just jokes.
Yeah.
He's just telling his old standard kind of like nightclub jokes, and he's got such great delivery. But I recently ran into Newhart. Jeff Garland's like, come here, you got to talk to Newhart. And I talked to Newhart, and I was bringing up all these sketches from the Dean Martin show. He's like, how do you know the Dean Martin sketch? Like, how do you know these? I'm like, I just watch them all the time. He's like, I haven't had this conversation forever.
It's interesting that because I've watched a lot of those the roasts and whatever the Dean Martin show was, and that he never showed up until tape day.
Sure, yeah.
You know, and which I would imagine had to not drive the other actors and guests nuts, but you have to be on your toes because you don't know where he's going.
Well, I think Greg Garrison, the director of the show, he wrote a book on it, and he's the one that oversaw the release of the box set of his shows coming out. But the reason I think Dean Martin did that is he was so comfortable in his nightclub routine and comfortable on stage that he wanted to keep the spontaneity. So all the gaffes, even when Carson, bomb on monologue joke, pulls the mic down and says the punchline in again, those gaffes are always what I think the audience remembers. It shows the charm of the performer in those moments. So to me, it was keeping the spontaneity alive.
They didn't have TV and radio the way we do now. So they had to relate to the audience, and they had to be kind of quick.
Yeah.
And stuff. Who obviously Dean Martin. Who else did you kind of look up to as you were coming up, entertaining wise, or as comedians?
I mean, when I started in New York, my exposure to stand-up was kind of limited because I didn't grow up listening to Eddie Murphy or Dice on the cassette tapes like all my friends did. I was playing hockey and goofing off. And then as I got older, like once I got immersed in stand-up, obviously you love Carlin, you love Pryor, you know, the standards. But I always looked up to guys like Jim Norton, Colin Quinn, Greg Giraldo, especially Norton, because we're so different. We're very different people, but I really loved how honest he was. with just talking about trannies and getting blowjobs from these people. And you listen to the act, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe he's this fucking honest. But not only be that honest, but to get laughs from it. I mean, that's the difficult needle to thread. To be that blunt, that forthcoming, but to find the humor in it, it's a very, very difficult thing to do, and very few people can do it. Anybody can talk about McDonald's. Anybody can talk about,
Right.
the airplane, the seat back and all that shit. What's really hard is to do what Norton does. What's really hard to do is what Bill Burr does. And Bill is another guy. If I was a freshman in high school, Bill was a sophomore. So we were friends, definitely, especially back in the day in New York. We're in much different tax brackets now. But he was
You're on
somebody
there.
that
You'll
was,
get there.
he was so himself. And I'll never forget this time I was in New York City. We would go to Yankee games all the time together, even though I was a big Red Sox fan. We go to Ranger, whatever, just any sporting event we would go to together.
Red Sox fan.
He's a huge Red Sox fan.
Oh, he is?
Yeah.
Okay. I won't let him back in, but okay.
So we'd go, and I remember this one day, this foul ball comes up, right? And this man and this little boy stand up, and the man, taller, catches the ball. So he turns around, some people clap. It's Yankee Stadium. The guys are, boo, give it to the kid, boo, give it to the kid, you loser. I mean, this guy's getting pounded for 2 minutes straight. And he's holding on the ball, he's looking with his friend, and then, the boos catch up to him. He's like, fuck, okay. So he stands up, and he makes a presentation about it, right? He's like, holds up the ball for everybody to see, and he like hands it and extends it to the little boy. And the little boy catches the ball. People start clapping. Bert goes, you fucking pussy, you should have kept the ball. Smoke this, everybody else is smoking it, you loser. And he's going on and on and on for 2 minutes. I never saw a comic turn section like 148 into an open mic, but man, he was getting big laughs. And then
hilarious.
you realize when you go out with Bert to any sporting event, he's constantly heckling, and he's great at that.
Yeah, be prepared, huh?
Yeah.
Where do you draw from with your routine? Do you draw from your life? Do you draw from the headlines or everywhere?
I think like now, especially with this new hour, I'm definitely doing monologue jokes. So I'm trying to stay evergreen, but create fun, monologue style jokes. But I think the root of it all, and I didn't really discover this until maybe the last like 2 or 3 years, subconsciously looking back on my early years in stand-up and why I got involved and why this means anything to me. I think it's about my identity, being Korean and Irish and being, picked on when you're a little kid and made fun of all those years.
Let me ask you, because I don't want to miss out on this question, because I know your time is limited. Why do you do comedy? What do you get out of it yourself?
Well, I think like, and this is something I reference in the film via Cedric the Entertainer. I think when you're young, you're smitten by the fact that you can put down some algorithm of writing, right? And it generates, for some reason or another, laughter, right? And I think that that's such a positive emotion, a positive feeling, that you get hooked instantly by that. I mean, who doesn't like
The
laughter or the attention or trying to get laid or meeting girls or all that other stuff? The girls were always kind of secondary, but like I was always honed in on it.
Come on, man.
Back in the day, but but I was still always focused on stand-up. But I think as I get older again, you go back to the fact of like, okay, well, you're doing the laugh, you're writing these jokes, and you're hopefully discerning a laugh, so that you feel good about that. And it makes you feel good, right? But as I got older, I realized, no, you're writing these things so that they feel good. So that they feel good, the room feels good, that you're providing a great vibe in that room this evening so people forget about their lives for 1 hour. And I guess before it was selfish, and now it's selfless.
Right. And that goes back to the story you told about Tanner. And,
Sure, yeah.
That's... if I walk in and there's a performer up here, and you kind of like you watch the audience and the audience is laughing, you go like, wow, these people are just really, they've had a hard day. They've come from work or wherever they've come from, and like they are now escaping whatever they're doing.
And I think that's one thing I hate, especially as I get older, is like and you've heard this, I'm sure. If you had a dime for every time you heard this, you'd be a gazillionaire of comic. They didn't get me. It's like, no, you didn't get them. It's your job to get them. So you fucking figure it out. And if you can't figure it out, then get the fuck off the stage. It comes with time, of course, but anybody who's been doing this for 15, 20 plus years, it's your responsibility to shift from crowd work, to shift from that material, to shift from blue humor, to shift from, if it's late night Saturday, you can be a little more blue. Figure it out.
Yeah.
But don't fucking blame them. No, and sometimes it is shitty. You can't, the mojo in the room's bad. But don't fucking take it out on them because they still paid. They're still here. They still want to have a good time.
Right.
It's up to you. Maybe you can crack them.
That's like, and I've told this story before, like when I used to watch the open mics when we had them in the lab room.
Yeah.
There'd always be some comic new. I have to give them that would go up there, and they would tell a joke, nobody would laugh, and then they would go, "Come on, guys, that's my best joke." And you know me, I'm standing over there going like, "Well, then you need to get off." It's like, why would you say that?
Yeah,
it's not. Steve, I know you got to go. I really want to thank you. This is really, you got plenty of time. Okay, let's go on.
Yeah. I want to ask you, can I ask you some questions?
Sure, go ahead.
Because you've seen it all, you've done it all, and I think that you are an incredible conduit as to seeing the ups and downs of comedy, from its heyday to its dip in the 90s, which it was kind of left for dead, to its resurgence. Right. From point A to present, like, I've had numerous conversations with comedians about the state of comedy, with PC culture, with woke comics, et cetera, et cetera. What is your take on how, what is your take? I'm really interested in your take on how reined in comedy is, or how much freer it is today as opposed to, especially the boom back in the day.
Well, it's probably, it's funny. It's probably a lot more reined in, unfortunately, because of this PC stuff that's going on. But at the same time, because it was like, let's say 30, 40 years ago, the subjects that were broached and talked about that are now talked about weren't talked about back then.
Right.
And they are still, those are allowed. It's what's happened is really a cultural society thing in terms of the political correctness. And I think they take a lot away from a comedian in terms of what you think is funny, what the audience wants to hear, because somebody's going to say like, "Oh man, that's offensive."
Right.
Well, but they used to always say that.
Sure.
And the difference may be is that they're more literal now. They will actually say, that shit sucks or whatever, and somebody's going to go, "Oh man, that's my religion." Whereas back in the day, it was a lot of innuendo.
Right.
So
now it's a little more direct. You mean nail on the head?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a lot more direct. But people have become, and not comedians, people have become too sensitive about everything. You're going out to be entertained. Comedy is there for you to release, and like we talked about earlier. But I don't. I think there's a tremendous difference in terms of what the public accepts now.
Yeah.
And my answer is always, you can walk out the door. If it's offensive to you and you don't like it, then leave.
Yeah.
You can't put your values on someone else. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And guys like Burr and Chappelle and whoever else, I applaud them. You go and say what you want to say.
Yeah.
If I don't like it, I leave. I can't. I'm not going to turn to the rest of the audience and go like, "Hey guys, this guy's talking about that," and But that's what we've become.
Yeah, it is. It is a sad state of affairs, but I think that there's always a bathroom tile missing, right?
Yeah.
But I think for the most part, until you start seeing 4 or 5 or 6 bathroom tiles missing, it's like, all right, then I'll get worried. But yeah, but I want to ask you this: who's the best tipper at the bar in all your years?
Oh, there's a couple. There's
Who's top three?
Drew Carey,
Yeah.
Joe Rogan,
Oh, nice.
and probably Adam. Well, there's a few. Adam Devine now, and Swartzen. You know, those that have money. And look,
Is Swartzen giving you a little extra for cleanup though?
no, actually, he used to pay me so he could come back and play music behind the bar.
Oh, that makes
those
sense.
were
Yeah,
like, like, Eddie, can I come back there and control the music?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nick. It's $40. You're on. But those were like, that's. He loved to do that. I love to have him there, and people love it. I've even had who is it? Chris Redd and Jack Knight and those guys today take over the music and all.
I always love your playlists.
I'm good. It's
Yeah.
like, but at times I let them just do their thing. I try to, believe it or not, play to my audience, the bar crowd.
Yeah.
So in terms of music, I mean, I'm a little, retro?
I love it though. Who do you, in all your years, obviously you met so many great comics. Who do you miss seeing at the club?
Who do I miss seeing at the club? Let's see. Well, probably, George Wallace.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I mean, and this is really from back in the day because these guys, George, I don't know if you know who Brand von Hoffman is. He was a comedian way back then. And Carol Siskind. And these were people that, they would hang at the bar, and the bar was just a lot of fun. Unfortunately, right now, a lot of comics aren't hanging, but it's really from back in the day.
Yeah.
It's Anthony Clark, who I threw out.
Oh, yeah.
who can't come in here and drink, but I mean he was a trip. There's been really, honestly, so many. People ask me, who's your favorite comic? I don't have a favorite comic. It's like, I like comedy. If I go to a show or I walk in, I'm an easy audience. You can make me laugh. I'm not one of those guys who's going to go, even though I look it, who's going to go make me laugh.
Right.
No, I'm, why would I be here?
Sure.
If I come into the show, it's like if I'm going to tell you to prove it to me,
Right.
I'm in the wrong place, and people do that.
Yeah.
So I don't do that at all. I'm easy, and so many comics. Again, everybody will ask well, who's not nice? Well, first of all, I'm not going to tell you.
Of course.
And and second of all, it's like they're really, comics like everybody else are people. You have a certain amount that aren't nice guys, and most are.
Yeah.
It's just the way it is. It's really, they're all nice. Yeah, well, think about it. If you're a lawyer and you work in a firm of 50 lawyers, there's going to be a few you don't like.
Sure.
And everybody else you're fine with. And that's just, comedians are people too.
Yeah.
Let
me ask you, this is my last question for you. What was the last, or excluding your big night, okay, what was the one of the best nights you've ever experienced at the Improv in terms of just kismet, magic, it all coalescing, and something special about that evening?
Well, there's probably a bunch of them, again, from back in the day when we would have Bruce Willis and John Goodman and even Michael J. Fox hanging out, and they would sing to the jukebox, and usually the entire bar would carry on.
Right.
And that happened nightly. And happened nightly to the point where once Bud and Mark went home, there would be dancing on the bar.
Oh, nice.
A lot of the women would go can we get up on the bar? Well, I'm not looking. Go ahead.
I will be in a minute, I'll be sure.
But it was more a time than it was a particular night.
Sure, yeah.
Those things went on almost every night, and
Wow.
it was the 80s. It was comedy was at its peak. This place was at its peak.
Yeah.
Everybody and anybody. This is where you came.
Sure.
And every night was an adventure. Every single night, somebody different would come in, and they may not get involved acting wise, or like I remember Denzel sitting at the bar, Washington, and Will Chamberlain, and I mean all these guys. They may not get involved, but they're having a darn good time too.
Out, yeah. Oh,
so
nice.
there have been a lot of good days like that, and even now occasionally we get into that kind of frenzied fun. It's like now that I know about you, I'm going to make sure you hang out a little bit so that we can really party.
I have no problem with that. I think it's just like these days with, I live in Pasadena now, so it's like, I got to Uber, I got to make a thing out of it.
I know.
And, all that stuff. So,
because people say to me, how come you don't come down when you're off? Well, because I live in Thousand Oaks, so that's like an hour away. If I come down and drink, what am I going to do?
Sure.
I certainly am not going to get in my car because I get stopped a half a dozen times a year just to be checked, because by the time I get home, I'm the only one on the road out where I live, and they have nothing to do. And honestly, I don't mind it. I understand what they're doing. But so I can't let loose. I used to live 2 minutes from here.
Right.
And I used to come down almost all the time in the 80s when I wasn't working, because this was the place to be.
Sure.
It's like when anybody was off, this is where we all came.
Nice.
But now, again, same thing. I can't party to that extent. And I'm a couple of years older, so I don't quite handle it as well as I did back in the day.
Time for a Red Bull.
Yeah, well, you notice that right here. But the times have changed, and they have not changed, good or bad. They just change. Yeah, it's everybody always goes to like, I'll bet that was the best time. Yeah, but this is your best time. Yeah, for whatever it is you do, live, whatever. People don't realize that. A lot of times they'll go, I wish I was here in the 80s and all. Yeah, and, yes, I still think those are the best times, but that doesn't mean that now the 2020s or whatever isn't your 80s.
Yeah, I mean, it's always what you make of it. I was just at the club up the street the other night, and
you can name it.
Yeah, I was at the store, and I had some friends come see me. It was my last set of the night, and I was drinking, and I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna Uber home, and I just had a ripper of a night, and then I showed up the next day at the Comedy Store. I walk in, and the bar staff just starts applauding. I go, oh no, what? And they go, last night, huh? I was like, yeah, last night. They go, do you remember dancing on the bar? I was like, I danced on the bar? They go, do you remember falling off the bar? I go, I don't remember even dancing, so I don't remember falling. They're like, Brent Morin caught you. I was like, oh my God. And then Frank Castillo, this other comic, goes, oh my God, last night, huh? I go, what happened last night? He's like, man, we smoked so much weed. I'm like, I smoke weed with you? I never smoke weed. He's like, you don't smoke weed? I was like, no. He's like, you smoked a lot. I was like, I smoked a lot of weed? So it was one of those nights, but I was like, I've never been shy to be like, yeah, this is when you're supposed to do these things, right?
It is. Well, especially as a comedian, after you perform or hanging out with other comics, it's like that's your time to let loose.
I want a goddamn story.
Yeah, you guys.
I got a good story out of it.
Yeah, you guys, that's it. That's the way now, unfortunately, everybody zips out after their sets, but it used to be it. Everybody would hang at the bar and get drunk or whatever, and again, in the 80s, we couldn't get people out of here. Honestly, they would be here till 3, 4 in the morning. Even though we grabbed the drinks at 2 o'clock, it'd be like, guys, you got to go. Yeah. No, you got to go.
Yeah.
And it's like you don't exist. They would just sit down and talk and whatever, and that's what we're all about, though.
Yeah.
Especially with the comics. You guys hang out and do your thing, and every now and then people would kind of sneak back into the showroom and with drinks, even though it was like after 2 or what have you. And that's the world of comedy.
Yeah,
that's
it is. It's still the Wild West.
Mm-hmm. Steve, thank you so much
it's
for being here.
It's an honor and a privilege, honestly.
I thank you. I want to give you something before you go.
Me?
This is a collector's item.
Oh, yeah.
I've only given out, how many? 200? This is a T-shirt with Eddie's Bar at the Improv, podcast on it. Wear it proudly.
This.
Do you have a podcast?
I had one with Gary Cannon,
Uh-huh.
our mutual
Oh,
friend,
yes.
and I did it for a long time. And due to the film, I couldn't give the time to it. But we're rebooting, and we're going to do something again together.
Oh, cool,
So I
good.
love Gary.
And when is the movie coming out?
The movie's going to come out this summer. It's the opening act, so we'll have a trailer out soon. And if you like stand-up, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
you listen to this podcast. This is definitely for you. It's everybody's been to a comedy club, but nobody's been on the road, and that's what
Right.
this film is about.
That's interesting because it's like I've been to a comedy club for quite a while, but I've never been on the road, and
Yeah.
it's I'm going to look forward to it. Thanks again, Steve. Guys, thank you. I appreciate it. We will see you next time for our next episode. Peace.